Good evening. And welcome to Stories from the Rock at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation at Shelter Rock. I'm Reverend J. Brooks. My pronouns are she and her. I'm part of the ministry team here, along with Reverend Jennifer Brower and the Reverend Dr. Natalie Fenimore, our lead minister. It is a joy to see you gathered here, and a welcome to the folks who are gathered online as well. Doesn't everybody love a good story? And it's wonderful to be able to introduce you to Tracey Segarra, storyteller extraordinaire, and the coach of our storytellers today. Tracey, I'd like to turn this over to you now. Let's give her a big hand.
Thank you, Reverend. And just a clarification, these are professional storytellers. I did not coach them. I helped coach during the pandemic a group of your congregation members, and then we had a wonderful storytelling show online. But these guys know their stuff. So if we could just put the audience lights down a little bit. I love when we have like a dark room like we're in a theater. Thank you all for coming. It is wonderful to share stories with all of you. How many of you have never been to a storytelling show before? Wow, lots of you. Okay, you are in for a treat. What you're going to hear tonight are 5 storytellers. Unfortunately, one of our storytellers had to beg out at the last minute, who are going to be sharing with you true personal stories from their lives as they remember it. Every story is going to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and somehow they're going to be changed by what happens in this story. So one of the things I did, the theme of the evening is beautiful mistakes. So each of the stories you're going to be hearing tonight touch somewhat on the theme beautiful mistakes. So I asked everybody a question before they come up, because you have all of their biographies in your program, so I don't have to read their bios to you. So the question I asked all of the storytellers is, what is something you assumed as a child was true, but later learned was something else entirely? And our first storyteller, Michaela Bligh, gave this response. I genuinely thought that high-altitude directions on brownie mix were for flight attendants making brownies from scratch for first-class passengers during a flight, which I think is entirely reasonable. I never understood what that meant either. So please welcome our first storyteller to the stage, Michaela Bligh.
Hello, hello. Okay. So it's 1993, and I am not the only person in my English class in love with my English teacher, but I'm the only one who really understands him. I went to a boarding school, and at my school, everyone either played lacrosse or did drugs, and I did not do either of those things. In fact, the kind of thing I did, to give you a sense, was I wrote a Midsummer Night's Dream fan fiction. Short stories loosely based on the characters from A Midsummer Night's Dream. So as you can imagine, a lot of my friends were the teachers, right? Which was great. And one of those friends, maybe the best friend of all, was Mr. L. He was 25. He was Cuban-American. He had been a spear carrier at the Folger Shakespeare Library when he was in college, which was basically like being a rock star to me. And we talked about T.S. Eliot together, and my love for him was pure and true and real. And the other girl who loved him, Sasha, her love was not pure and not true and not real. She was a year older than me. She was really sexy in like kind of an overt way. She wore sort of half shirts with bells on them, you know? And she would walk around telling anyone who would listen about her very explicit fantasies about Mr. L, which I found very inappropriate. I kept my fantasies to myself. And in fact, I was 16 years old, and my fantasies were very PG. This was the craziest fantasy I had about Mr. L. Are you ready? We go out for ice cream. Off campus, in his car. He drives me back in time for curfew, opens the door, unzips my dress, curtain. That's it. But I sort of figured, and I knew, like, we are never, and by the way, I've had sexual tension with people since, and I know now there was nothing happening there. But I sort of felt like, in 5 years, I'm gonna show up in New York City in a blazer, and he's gonna open his door, and he's gonna realize it's always been me. That was like the idea, right? And I had reasons that I thought this. So I thought, we're sort of meant for each other. Here are the reasons that I thought we were meant for each other. Number one, we co-produced the Shakespeare Festival together. Not I was a student and he was the advisor. We co-produced it. We were equal partners in this, okay? Number two, we had the same favorite sonnet, Sonnet 40. So another reason we were going to be together. And then there was one time when I was coming to a meeting with him, and I had like a copy of A Midsummer Night's Dream, and I'd gotten it out from the library. And it was one of those little blue Yale Shakespeare books. I don't know if you've ever seen these books. They're from like 100 years ago. They're these little blue volumes, a separate one for each play, and I had A Midsummer Night's Dream. And I come into the meeting, and he looks at it, and he's misty-eyed, and he takes it from me, and he's like, at the Folger Shakespeare Library, where I was a spear carrier, the lead always had these books, and I thought they were so cool. And I bought myself a set of them. And then this woman I was in love with, I gave them to her, and she broke my heart and took them with her, and I've always missed those books. And I was like, we are two equals talking about our heartbreaks together at this point, right? It's only a couple of weeks after he tells me this, we're having our meeting. It's a couple weeks after that he announces he's leaving school. This is a couple months before the end of school, and he's going to be going to law school. This means the clock is on for me to make sure that I am unforgettable to him, right? For me to show up in a blazer. So I need to get him something, give him a going away present that is gonna really cement me in his head, to make him understand I see him, I understand him, we see each other. Sasha, meanwhile, goes around talking about the very sexy song she is composing on acoustic guitar for him. Very inappropriate. And I have a new fantasy about him now, which is, I will admit, based on the play Arcadia by Tom Stoppard. I loved that play. I had written a paper about it, gotten an A. It was about a girl who is in love with her tutor. It takes place in the 1850s. It's so romantic. They have one doomed kiss. And so I sort of was like, oh, we're going to have this one moment. I'm going to give him something. We're going to have this one moment, and then it's going to be gone, and then we'll start our lives together later. In this play, she does die in a fire, I want to say. That part, I didn't have that in my fantasy. So anyway, and I know what I'm going to get him. I know what my perfect gift is going to be. It's those books. It's the Yale Shakespeare books. So I call the used bookstore in my town. They don't have a full set of Yale Shakespeare from 1920, like antique books, obviously. I call 2 towns over, no Yale Shakespeare. This is 1993, this is before eBay. I end up calling all the way down the eastern seaboard, and I finally find a full set of Yale Shakespeare from 1920 in North Carolina for $150 plus $30 shipping and handling. And I write a check from my savings account, and I get it sent up to my school. Okay, I feel pretty cool about this. The problem is I had not really thought this through. So in order to have a moment with him, I had to get him alone to give him this gift. But you can't just carry around 40 hardcover books and be like, oh, hey, there you are. I have something for you, right? You can't do that. So I've told him I have a gift for him. I don't know how to give it to him, but I'm sort of trying to figure it out. And finally, it's 2 weeks before the end of school. And he has dorm duty in my dorm. 25. He's a heartthrob, right? So all the girls are down in the common room with him. And he looks at me and he says, hey, didn't you say you had a gift for me? And as soon as he says that, reality sort of shifts into focus. I have just spent $180 on this guy. And if I give him this gift, this is not a secret anymore. Like, this is going to be so embarrassing. Everyone's going to know how I feel about him, and I'm going to give him this totally, and I'm like, no, it's okay, never mind. He's like, no, why not now? You're right here, it's almost the end of school, bring it down. Sasha is there with her acoustic guitar, by the way. And I head upstairs, and I'm just realizing everyone's going to look at me with so much pity. In my dorm, I was already the friendly alien. I mean, I didn't really feel cool a lot. And this was just going to make it worse. And I go downstairs, and I put this box in front of him, and he opens it. And the minute he opens it, he can see what it is. He can see the color of the books. And the minute he opens it, you can sort of see it's these blue books. And he looks up at me, and his eyes are shining, like he's maybe going to cry. And Sasha goes, Mr. L, are you crying? And he doesn't look at her. He just looks at me, and he goes, you remembered. And we have this smile together, like we're sharing a joke. And suddenly, I realized, like, we do sort of see each other. We do understand each other. It is really nice to have a friend. And I feel really cool that we have this, like, private joke. And he says, thank you so, so much. And he puts them really carefully away. And I feel so much better. And it's perfect, except that I have to tell you that I now have to live with the fact that somewhere out there is a copy of A Midsummer Night's Dream, Yale Shakespeare, that I inscribed. And I'm going to tell you the inscription now. Dear Mr. L, thank you so much for changing my life forever, the way I hope I changed yours. Love, your friend Michaela, and maybe someday something more. I'm probably blushing, I don't know. I feel really red. Thank you, that's it.
Oh, what a beautiful story. I love that story. Once again, from Michaela Bligh, story of star-crossed lover. All right, our next storyteller to come to the stage, again, I asked the same question, which is, what is something you assumed as a child was true but later learned was something else entirely? And I think a lot of you are going to relate to this one. Our next storyteller is Kim Kirkley, and Kim says, when reciting the alphabet, I thought LMNOP was one letter. Please welcome to the stage, Kim Kirkley.
I was nearly trembling as I approached this storied Manhattan hotel. There was a red carpet, and I was supposed to walk down it. Flashes were popping. I felt like I finally arrived. I was being honored for the work I do as a life cycle celebrant and interfaith minister, creating and delivering love story-focused wedding ceremonies. And this wasn't just a little honor. I was being honored along with Wolfgang Puck, Vera Wang. I have to tell you, I approached that red carpet with my head up. No flashes really popped for me, but that was okay. It was my time. And it was a great night. Now, you might wonder, why was I honored along with these legendary people? Well, I think it has to do with the fact that I've married some pretty notable people, and I treat everyone as if they're a celebrity, and the organization I'm affiliated with has a really great publicist. So it was a great night. It was a lot like most of the weddings that I've done. Great food, great energy. And then it ended like most of my professional life. I went home to an empty apartment, and I felt crushing loneliness. All my life, I wanted to be a parent. So much so that I was a big girl at 12 years old, carrying this baby doll around, and my uncle kind of looked at me like, he thought I was going to be a teen parent. Not that there's anything wrong with it. But that's not what my family wanted for me, and I knew that when I became a parent, I was going to give it my all. So I really put parenthood on the back burner. I didn't think much about it, because I knew when it was my time, I'd be all in. When I was 41, though, and the apartment seemed lonelier than ever, I was like, okay, it would be nice to have a partner, but I want a child. So I asked a friend who I'd always had in the back of my mind, maybe he would be a good match for this kind of endeavor. And he said yes after some hemming and hawing. Turns out about 2 months before, he'd put an ad in Craigslist seeking somebody to have a child with. Everything seemed lined up perfectly. I was almost cocky as I walked into that red brick building near NYU. We decided to use a fertility clinic because he was working in San Francisco, I was in New York. We couldn't make everything line up, and we wanted this child as soon as possible. So the technician put the goo on my belly, moved that wand. I was like, there's a follicle there. And she was kind of like, yeah, there's a follicle there. And then she called somebody else in. Well, that wasn't what I expected. I was a little confused. This person, I was like, well, maybe she's new. This person takes the wand, moves it, and then I got a white form, and they said they saw something there, but they want to make sure. So I take this white piece of paper 2 blocks over to NYU's Langone Hospital, and then I get another ultrasound, and this one, it was confirmed. There was a tumor on my ovary. Undaunted, I was like, okay. My surgeon asked me, did I want to do fertility-sparing surgery? I was like, no, that's okay. I'm a believer. I'll have my child. Well, that was about 15 years ago. I'm here with a normal life expectancy, but my body never really came back. And when your fertility doctor says, you should adopt, you listen, or I did. So I found an adoption agency. I was looking at Ethiopia, and then Ethiopia closed to single women. Then I found an agency based in California, 20-year track record. Sent them a little money. Things were moving along. Then they went bankrupt. Then I started to play with the idea of foster care, but I was way too afraid to get emotionally tied to a child who would be taken out of my home, maybe out of my life forever. So I found this agency that specialized in helping people adopt children in the foster care system. They approved my home study. And then that program closed. Now you might think, well, how do you keep going after all of that denial? I mean, time is ticking. I was 41 when I asked my friend. By now I'm 50. So, and people are saying, well, you'll never, you're not going to get a newborn. Why don't you look at a 10-year-old? 10-year-olds are great. And I was open, and I came to the conclusion that I had to do something because it was changing me. I received that honor because I'm open and loving to everybody. It's really hard to walk around the city and see all of these children. And, for me, I felt like nobody was doing parenting right. I was so judgmental. I was becoming so mean, so bitter, so closed. So I was like, well, if you want to parent, just parent. I got my courage up and I signed up with a regular foster care agency. And by then, I was kind of tired of the process, and I was just like, all right, here's my stuff. They approved my home study in a half hour. 15 minutes later, they called me back, and they said they had an 18-month-old little boy. Would I take him? I said, yes. Then they called me back about 15 minutes later. He's 8 days old, still in the hospital. Would you take him? Absolutely. So the night he arrived, I can't explain how much adrenaline I had. It was so much preparation at the last minute because it was totally unexpected that it would happen and that it would happen so quickly. He arrived after 9 o'clock at night. By then, I'm so tired. And I can't believe they leave this little boy with me. And that first night proved everything. He didn't sleep much, he cried a lot, he blew out his diaper, and I fell in love. I told him since we made it through this, we can make it through anything. And then, about a day after his first birthday, my worst fear came true. His biological father, 21 years old, came forward and wanted to parent. So I dropped him off at the agency. I tried to explain to him the best that I could what was happening. And then I went into deep grief. You can't quantify such things, but it was so many dreams just coming shattering down. 2 weeks later, I got a call. They had a little girl. I'd actually always wanted a daughter. But I said, no, I'm grieving. And then they called me back a couple of days later. She still needed a home. I was like, this little 3-week-old girl still needs a home? Well, I said, well, I'm going on vacation. If she still needs a home when I come back, I'll take her. I came home. She still needed a home. And by then I was like, well, she obviously needs someone. I need someone, because I was so much in parent mode. So she came home. Now, I gave both of my children nicknames because my son came back to me after about 6 months. And they're both on track to adoption, not done yet. So it can be rocky. But I gave both of my children nicknames, and I didn't know what they meant at the time. Turns out, Kaya means love in Yoruba, and Zaya means light in Arabic. So now I spend my days and nights taking care of these two little lights who bring so much love and light into my life. So my beautiful mistake was waiting and wading through all those denials to have it transformed into love and light. May all of your beautiful mistakes be transformed into love and light. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Kim. Beautiful story. I've got twins. They weren't mistakes, but they are 21, almost 22-year-old love and light. And for a while, there wasn't much love going on in their teen years, but we've gotten back on track. So I'm going to be your next storyteller. And I asked myself the same question I asked everybody else. What's something you assumed as a child was true, but later learned was something else entirely? And how many of you remember what Eisenhower State Park was named before it was Eisenhower? Salisbury, right? So I thought it was Salisbury Steak Park, right? Didn't you? And of course, that the Throg's Neck Bridge was really the Frog's Neck Bridge, because what's a frog? And that the dandelions and those fluffy things you blow on were two totally different things. I was convinced. Until I think I married my husband and he disabused me of that notion. So it's 1978. I am 16 years old, and I am standing in the driveway of my home on Great Neck, Long Island, and standing next to me is Dan Smith. And this is nothing short of a miracle, because besides Dan and I both being 16, we could not be any different. Dan is tall with dark hair. He's adorable. He is smart. He is in the Future Physicians Club in high school. He's a wrestler. He's popular. I am short, awkward, funny-looking. I am about to graduate very comfortably in the bottom third of my class. And I don't really have any extracurricular activities, except by default, I became editor of the literary magazine. And he joined the literary magazine as ad manager. So we have just spent the day together, walking around Great Neck, Long Island, getting businesses to buy ads for this literary magazine. And I am in seventh heaven, because nothing else would have thrown the two of us together. And he is laughing at my jokes, and I am looking at him, just mooning at him, because he's beautiful, and I am just thunderstruck and just in love. But I know this, nothing's going to happen here. And anyway, we're standing in the driveway, and all of a sudden he says to me, "What are you doing this weekend?" And my heart jumps out of my chest. Like, is he gonna ask me out? I feel like Barbara Streisand in the way we were, and like he's Hubble. Like, is he gonna be my Hubble? And I say, nothing much, really. And he says, "Oh." And that's all he says. And that's it. He starts dating a junior, high school ends, there goes that. But it's now about 6 years later, and I am living in Manhattan, and I graduate college by the skin of my teeth. I mostly majored in off-campus parties and drugs in college, and I have secured a job as a miserable secretary. I'm living in this Manhattan apartment, this dark apartment that gets sunlight only from about 1 o'clock till 1:20 in the afternoon. Otherwise, I'm staring at a brick wall. And Dan is in med school in the city, and we have some friends in common at this point, and not a lot of people are left in the city, and we just start hanging out as a group. And what do we all have in common? We both love to smoke a lot of weed. And so we get together on the weekends, and the party from college continues on. And one day, one of our mutual friends says to me, "Tracey, Dan says you're looking pretty good these days." And I'm like, be still my heart. Whoa, I am not going to let this opportunity slide by. And so I quickly invite him over to my apartment alone, not with anybody else, and he brings the weed, and I buy a bottle of Pouilly-Fussé, and we drink the entire bottle of wine, we smoke the weed, we are feeling no pain. And I am sitting so close to him on the couch that I can feel his breath on me. And I am just waiting. And he does nothing. And I say to myself, "Tracey, if you mess up this opportunity now, you will never forgive yourself." And even though I am shy beyond shy, I've had some experience in college, and I lean over and I kiss him. And pretty soon, it's on, and we have drunken, wonderful sex, and we start seeing each other. But from the beginning, he lets me know, well, there are red flags with this relationship. Like, he tells me that he doesn't love me, and he's never going to love me. But, I just dismiss that because whatever he says, I'm going to make him fall in love with me because he's going to see how wonderful I am. And really what we do most of all is smoke a lot of drugs. We do bong hits in the morning, we eat Cheese Whiz in bed. It's a wonderful relationship. And then we start getting into more serious drugs. Like, we start doing ecstasy, where everybody thinks the other person is like your best friend in the universe. And then we get into cocaine. And cocaine is a hell of a drug, because you get really high, and then all you want is to keep getting really high. And so we are doing this. We are losing days. We are losing weekends. We are losing lots of time. But Dan's in med school, and we go to a party with his friends. He went to an Ivy League school, and I see on the kitchen table there is like this pyramid of cocaine about 8 inches high, and everybody there is doing cocaine, and I'm like, well, it must be okay if they're all doing it, you know. And cocaine's not addictive, right? That's what I thought. Well, anyway, eventually Dan moves in with me, so much for him not, you know, caring about me. I mean, why would he move in with me? And the party continues. And then he decides to spend the last semester of med school overseas. And so I am in this apartment alone. And once he's gone, it suddenly occurs to me that the only thing I have going in my life right now is Dan. And he has gotten a residency in San Francisco in California where he's always wanted to live. And we haven't discussed it, but he has also not asked me to go with him. So while he's away, I realize that my life is a mess, that I'm a mess. And I'm not a very introspective person at this stage in my life. I'm 25 years old. But one day while I'm riding the train, I'm thinking to myself, you know, I've been going down this path and doing these things that I kind of know in the back of my head I shouldn't be doing, but I always kept telling myself, you know, I'm going to turn around one day and I'll go down the right path eventually and everything will be great. But this day, I realize that if I keep doing what I'm doing, I may not be able to make my way back, and I get scared. And a week later, I call up this hotline and I find out about sobriety and about meetings, and I start going to these meetings. And about 20 days later, I get a phone call, and it's Dan. And he says, honey, I miss you so much, and I miss him too. And I say, I miss you. And he says, there's something I want to ask you. He says, when I go to San Francisco, I want you to come with me. And again, my heart is doing double time. Like, is he asking me to move with him to California? Like, I've got nothing keeping me in New York. I've got this terrible job. I have no ambition to even have ambition about what I want to do in life. But, you know, this is a dream. Like, go to California, be with him, be a doctor's wife. It's also my mother's dream, you know, a Jewish doctor. But then he adds, you know, for a week, like for a vacation. And on a scale of 1 to, are you fucking crazy? Like, this is fucking crazy. And I say to him, I can't do this. And he begs me, and he says, please, Tracey, please. And I talk to the people who are sober and ask them, like, you know, what should I do? And they're all saying, Tracey, don't go. You absolutely cannot go. And so I listen to them, and Dan calls back. And so, of course, I go. And he's still using. Our first day in California, we're driving down the Pacific Coast Highway in his blue hatchback, and he turns to me, and he gives me that smile that I cannot resist. And he says, Tracey, I'm so glad you came. I'm so happy you're here. We're going to have a great time. And I say, yeah. But all I can think about is how this is going to end, and I'm not happy at all. But we do amazing things. We see giant sequoias in the redwood forest. We sleep under the stars at Big Sur. We get to Tijuana. But I know what's going to happen. And I tell him at the beginning, I tell him, you need to take me to a meeting every night because I am going to stay sober just to show those people back home that I can do it. And he says, I will. And he does, and I stay sober. Our last night together, we spend in Venice Beach. My sister lives there. And we spend our last night in my niece's my 4-year-old niece's bedroom. And we make love under her Cinderella blanket for the last time. And I have never let Dan know how much I have fallen for him. I try to keep it light, and so I do not want to cry. I don't want him to know how I feel. But, you know, I have no defenses anymore, and I just start sobbing uncontrollably. And he holds me, and he says, "It's going to be okay." And I just cry until I fall asleep. And I go back to New York, to my dark apartment, and I stay sober, and I keep going to these meetings, but it is much easier to give up the drugs and the booze than it is to give up Dan. And he is all I talk about at these meetings until somebody finally comes up to me at a meeting and says, "Tracey, would you please go to therapy?" And it takes a lot of therapy and Phil Collins songs for me to start getting over Dan. But one day I wake up and I realize that my first thought isn't him. And that's a start. And then one day a friend asks me, she says, "Tracey, you're only 26 years old. You hate your job. Like, what do you want to do with your life?" And I think about it, and I'm afraid to even say it. But I say, I want to be a writer. And 6 months later, I'm walking through the gates of Columbia University, and I'm working as an editorial assistant for a national magazine. And then 6 months after that, I get my first national article published in that magazine, and I meet my mentor, the managing partner, who becomes my mentor for the next 30 years. And you know, one day I'm riding the train home from that job, and I think about how ever since I was like a teenager, there was this hole inside that I tried to fill with drugs and Dan and men, and it never worked. But now that I've given that all up and I'm just left with myself and I'm starting this career, I realize that I'm actually starting to fill it up with me. Thank you. Thank you. All right, our next storyteller answered the question, what's something you assumed as a child was true but later learned was something else entirely. Tim Lopez says, "When I was a kid, I thought my dad was on the back cover of Billy Joel's Glass Houses album because he wore jeans and a black leather jacket and also had the same kind of hair. I later found out that my dad was not, in fact, Billy Joel." Please welcome Tim Lopez.
All right. Hello. All right, so back in the early aughts, I found myself in the midst of a full-blown quarter-life crisis. I had dropped out of UCLA, really as a way to get out in front of getting kicked out. I moved back in with my parents, and I was working more or less full-time as a bartender at a TGI Fridays in the San Fernando Valley. Now, Fridays, in its heyday, was highly regarded as something of a pioneer in the hospitality industry, responsible for several groundbreaking innovations, such as happy hour and ladies' night, and, you know, kind of an overall philosophy geared towards livening up the bar scene. And so it was kind of in this spirit that TGI Fridays is also the birthplace of something that is known as Flair bartending. Now, Flair bartending, if you don't know, is an aggressively flamboyant style of bartending that involves a lot of trickery, and it was immortalized in the 1987 film Cocktail, starring Tom Cruise as a young hotshot bartender who develops and deploys his bottle-flipping shenanigans at the TGI Fridays flagship store in Manhattan. And, it's the kind of thing... After this, okay, so it peaked basically with that film. I guess you can call it a peak. But after that, the awareness and the esteem of Flair bartending in the zeitgeist really went into a precipitous decline, as did the overall cachet of TGI Fridays as a hip dining and drinking establishment. Reaching perhaps its lowest point in the 1999 film Office Space, in which a thinly veiled TGI Fridays knockoff called Chachi's was so thoroughly mocked and ridiculed that by the time I got there, they had thoroughly scrubbed even so much as the word Flair from the entire corporate identity. It was just not even said. And that, of course, included Flair bartending, which was, kind of pushed into the shadows and forced underground, and it was really on the verge of becoming a lost art. But there were kind of always these rumblings and persistent rumors that there were pockets of bartenders that continued to practice it in secret, should it ever come back. And these rumors were confirmed in 2005 when corporate announced to mild fanfare the 2005 TGI Fridays Regional Bar Flair Championships, which was a grand spectacle in which one representative from each of the TGI Fridays locations in Southern California would be invited to compete against each other in this, extravaganza of bartending tomfoolery. I signed up for this immediately. Mostly because I had literally nothing else going on in my life at the time, but also because I felt like it was a way to express myself in a semi-theatrical manner in a safe space. And so I had 3 months to prepare for this. So true to form, I didn't really do any meaningful preparation until a couple of weeks before the event. And my training regimen consisted almost entirely of, occasionally having a few drinks and watching key scenes from Cocktail at half speed. So after this, slightest hint of preparation, I could do 3 tricks. All right, the first one is called a tin flip, and that's where you take the cocktail shaker off of the bar and you flip it up with one hand, you catch it behind your head. The other trick I could do is called a flip to a pour, in which you hold a bottle by the neck, you flip it and you catch it, and then immediately pour the drink. And the third trick I could do is a trick where you take the cocktail tin in your hand like this, and you throw it up here like this, and you catch it behind your back, and I dubbed that move the Tom Cruise. And after a bit of practice, I could do these 3 tricks sometimes. And so the day of the competition comes around, and needless to say, I was feeling a little bit underprepared. But, I told myself, what, who's even going to be at this thing, right? I expected a smattering of Flair bartending aficionados and, the usual crowd of suburban barflies that you tend to find at a TGI Fridays at 3 p.m. on a Monday. But I get there, and apparently they had done quite a bit of publicity for this event because the place was packed, all right? The restaurant was full. Every table was taken. The bar was like 5 deep at the bar. They were doing 2-for-1 drink specials and all-you-can-eat potato skins appetizers all night. I mean, the place was nuts. In addition, some coworkers of mine and some frenemies from my restaurant life had showed up without telling me they were going to watch, and there was a camera crew there, and they were filming it for distribution throughout every TV in the restaurant, but also via closed-circuit television to every participating TGI Fridays in North America. So there was a kind of a large crowd for this, and it was about at that point that I began to worry. And that worry escalated into outright panic as soon as we got started and I got to look at the competition. All right, so these were some legitimately badass individuals who all took Flair bartending very seriously. And they all came out with these extremely elaborately choreographed routines that were like set to music. And they were doing things like, flipping multiple bottles, like essentially juggling, and, flipping the bottle up and catching it on, on their forehead and other like high risk activities like that. They were like stacking glasses and doing all this kind of like stuff, lighting things on fire. It was like that kind of vibe. And so I was just kind of like, I watched, my heart sank because I kind of watched all this stuff happen. And I remember one girl in particular, and she came out, and her routine was set to a Rihanna song, and she came out, and she was just so graceful and so fluid in her movements and doing all these crazy tricks. And for her closer, she took 3 maraschino cherries and threw them in the air one at a time, and then caught them on a cocktail spear that she had wedged between her teeth. 1, 2, 3. It was amazing to witness. But it also made it very clear that I was not going to be competitive in this event. So I started to panic, and I'm just kind of wondering about what I'm going to do. And, I'm just kind of watching all this stuff happen. And what's worse is that we drew the order randomly, right? And so I selected, I was last. So I got to kind of just stand there and watch as people just got up there and just did all this out, absolutely shredded behind the bar, while I stood off to the side and withdrew into, like a personal shame spiral. So, it gets to the second to last competitor, the guy right before me, all right? And he gets up there, and he looks like the human embodiment of Flair bartending, okay? He's like buff, and he has like cool tattoos everywhere, and he has a man bun, and he's extremely attractive. And his name's like Esteban or something, so he's even like a little bit more Latino than me. And his routine is set to the Beastie Boys, "You gotta fight for your right to party." And so he gets up there and he just absolutely massacres, and he's doing all this cool stuff, and then he gets the the chorus of the song, and it's like, "You gotta fight, flip, flip for your right, catch, catch to party." And the place goes bonkers. And I'm standing there and I'm like, I can't believe this. Like, I've never seen anybody kill as hard as this guy's killed. So as for his closer, he jumps up on the rail, he grabs the whipped cream out of the rail, and there are these 3 girls that are sitting in the front row that are clearly plants. And they all throw their head back in unison and open their mouths, and he's like, "Whipped cream, whipped cream, whipped cream," and then jumps into the bar to just like thunderous applause. So I just have this horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach because I have to go next. And I'm panicked. And I'm having flop sweats. And I go over to my manager, Scott, and I'm like, "Yo, I can't do this." And he's like, "Wait, what do you mean? Like you have to. Like you're our representative." And I was like, "I don't care. Like I can't follow that guy. Like I'm gonna make a fool out of myself up there, And he's like, "Well, what do you want me to what do you want me to do? What am I supposed to say?" I'm like, "I don't know. Tell him I got sick. Which I did, which I am. I'm not doing it. And he's like, "All right, well, if you can't do it, you can't do it." And I saw this look come over his face. And it was a look that I was very familiar with at that time. It was a look of disappointment. And, I'd seen this look a lot in that time period, right? I'd seen it I've seen it on the faces of my parents when I told them that I was dropping out of school. I'd seen it on the faces of, employers at jobs that I was either quitting or getting fired from. I'd seen it on the faces of people who were breaking up with me, for something I did or something I didn't do. And, I kind of felt it, that it was like, this was my MO, right? That I was really great at starting things and beginning something with enthusiasm and with energy. But when it came time to do the work and when it got hard, I would bail. And, just maybe, this was why, my life had kind of stalled out, and I wasn't really doing much of anything except for working at this bar, and that was it, And then this thing comes up, and I can't even get this right, I can't even finish this. So I said, "You know what? It's fine. I'll do it." And Scott's like, "Okay, great. Go, you got this. Go get him." And I do not have this, and I turn around, and I slowly kind of walk up to the entrance to the bar. And I'm just kind of, I don't even know what I'm going to do, and I'm just waiting to go out there. And Scott's like, hey, wait, what song do you want me to play?" And I looked at him, and I said, "Bro, it doesn't matter." And I turned around, and I walked out into the bar. And I get out into the bar, and it's this beautiful long bar with 3 sides, and it's packed with people, and they're all looking at me, with this eager look on their faces. They just have their minds blown by this dude, and they're just waiting for the next thing. They're primed, they're eager to see the next level of Flair bartending, And I know it's not going to happen. I just look down, and I'm looking at my non-slip shoes and that bar mat with the holes, just looking down and waiting for the music to start. And I hear the music start, and the song that Scott chose was Billy Idol, "Dancing with Myself." And I'm like, this is perfect. and I just kind of laugh. And then I kind of start to chuckle. And then I start tapping my feet, kind of getting going. And then for the next 3.5 minutes, I go ahead and proceed to do only what can be described as a complete and total mockery of the art and craft of Flair bartending. Everything goes wrong. My first tin flip hits me right in the face. I try to do a flip to a pour, and the nozzle hits me in the wrist and falls on the ground. I'm flinging bar mixes and juices all over everybody in the front row, and I'm failing spectacularly. But you wouldn't know it. I'm kind of in character as someone who's failing to the extreme, but just isn't aware of it. I'm smiling. I'm having a great time. I'm mugging for the camera. I'm all over the place, but I'm getting a reaction. People are laughing. People are enjoying it, right? And so, for my closer, as an homage to Esteban, I grab the Bloody Mary mix out of the rail. I jump on the rail. I pulled it like this over the girls' heads, and they look at me look at each other, and then at me what are you doing? I'm like, this isn't going to happen. Jump down into the bar, all right? And that's it. That's my set. And, you know, yes, I did get one of the lowest technical scores ever recorded at these events. But my enthusiasm score was a 10.0. And I knew that I could do it, I knew that I could follow through, and I'll always know that at least I have flair. Thank you.
Awesome story, awesome story. You gotta have heart. Before I bring up our final storyteller for the evening, we had one storyteller, unfortunately, who had to drop out at the last minute, but that gives us all an opportunity. We have microphones on either side, so after the last storyteller, if any of you would like to stay and ask questions of the storytellers, how they came up with their stories, how they worked on them, anything that wasn't answered in the story that you deeply want answers to, they will be most happy to do that for you. So if you want to stick around after the show, that is something that we're going to try. All right. Everybody ready for our final storyteller of the evening? Are you guys having a good time? There's nothing better than stories, if you ask me. I discovered storytelling in 2015 by listening to the Moth Radio Hour, and I have been obsessed ever since, and it's unbelievable. All right. I asked that same question that you all know by now, and our final storyteller, Jamie Brickhouse, said, "I thought that old people weren't allowed to dine in regular restaurants, only cafeterias, because cafeterias were filled with old people, and they were the only places my grandmothers ate out." Please welcome Jamie Brickhouse.
Oh, I got taller. So the day after my 83-year-old father's, J. Earl Brickhouse, funeral, I smirked like Sarah Palin as I threw in the garbage. This was 9 years ago. I threw away in the garbage his 13-year collection of George and Laura Bush Christmas cards. They had metastasized like a Republican cancer on his kitchen counter. And I was like, I thought I had given the Fox News side of him a thorough Karen Silkwood shower. But God and the merciless God and the dead have a merciless sense of humor. Because the very next day, I opened the mailbox at his Texas house, outpoured a diarrhea of conservative correspondence from places like the National Republican Committee and the American Conservative Coalition and the Tea Party Express and Ted Cruz and Heidi Cruz and pleas from Priests for Life to save the newly inseminated, with headlines like, "Late-term abortions are happening more often than you think." And I thought, really? I mean, how many people are having late-term abortions? Procrastinators, I guess. Now, my father and I, we adored each other. We had a lot in common, and he called me Jamie Pooh, and I called him Daddy Pooh. And he was a Catholic, conservative, staunch Republican who had lived his entire life in that small town in Texas. But he was also one of the most tolerant people I knew, and he loved me unconditionally. And he always accepted my homosexuality, but I don't think he ever accepted my liberal values. So whenever I was down there in Texas visiting him, we usually just put politics aside, and we focused on all the things that we had in common: love of theater and the arts and Broadway shows and old movies. And he would turn off Fox News and turn it on to Turner Classic Movies. And we would ignore the red, white, and blue elephant in the middle of the room. But still, I think we kept harboring secret wishes for each other. He kept wishing I would start voting Republican. I kept wishing he would stop. I guess I finally got my wish. But my God, was this constant onslaught of junk, conservative junk mail. It was like a campaign from the grave. So I stayed down there at the house in Texas for several weeks. I was executor of the estate, and I had to, deal with all the estate and clean the house out and get it ready for sale. And every day, I would go to that mailbox, and I'd open it up with a hefty garbage sack, and I would try to winnow out the important pieces of mail from all that conservative crap that arrived as frequently as anti-LGBTQ measures in southern states. And it would go directly into that hefty garbage sack. And I have to tell you, it was cathartic when once a week I would stand at the edge of the driveway in my terry cloth bathrobe and a coffee mug, and I would watch the garbage truck crush all those Hillary hate letters and Obama scare you rants into fresh landfill. So a few months later, I sold the house, pretty much settled up the estate. And before I left, I closed that mailbox. The mail is done. 2 weeks later, I opened the door of the tiny mail slot in the lobby of my Manhattan apartment building. Out pours a diarrhea of conservative correspondence with those yellow forwarding address stickers. It's following me! Overnight, my friendly mailman had become a specter of the Republican agenda. And I started checking my mail furtively so that the neighbors wouldn't see, as if I was getting kiddie porn instead of envelopes with headlines like "Ted Cruz for President." This was 2015, a kinder, gentler time. Now, I'm old enough that I still receive fun mail, real mail from friends, traveling friends, postcards, remember postcards, and holiday cards during Christmas season. But the one sender of fun mail missing, Daddy Pooh. When he was alive, I got something from him, almost at least once a week, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week. I always got a birthday card, often a gay pornographic birthday card. There's that ribald sense of humor of his. But about once a week, I would get, a newspaper clipping or a cartoon with a yellow Post-it note with his witty, wry comments written in his shaky old man spook house font. And so now that I was receiving all of his junk mail, it meant that I wasn't receiving mail from him. And as much as I hated all that conservative crap in my mailbox, it was a perverse way to stay connected to him. But God damn it, old people get a lot of mail, and dead people even more. And then I was like, okay, just stop freaking out. When the yellow forwarding address thing expires, the mail will stop. Wrong. Congratulations, J.L. Brickhouse, on your recent move. Now the mail was being sent directly to him at my address, sans yellow forwarding address stickers. They have to be stopped. I felt like Norma Ray or Erin Brockovich. And I kind of went a little crazy. And I took each envelope and I got a red magic marker and I wrote, "Return to sender. Deceased, dead, can no longer vote or give money to you monsters." And it didn't work. A few days later, all those red inked envelopes were sitting back in my mailbox like proud carrier pigeons come home to roost. And it turns out that junk mail, because of its special postage rate, cannot be returned. And that's when I became nuts and obsessed. I work for myself at home, and I started calling each and every organization individually and demanded that they cease mailing the deceased. Now, these calls they're a huge time suck. They can take anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes. And I was as relentless as a senator trying to overturn Obamacare. But I was still barely making a dent. My work started to suffer. I skipped meals. I forgot to bathe. And I remember I looked one day at my dining room table that was piled high with all that junk mail, and I just said, the mail is winning. But then one day, I am on the phone with a nice lady from the American Bible Society. And I tell her, I'm kind of at the end of my rope, and I've already made about 5 calls that day, and I tell her that, and I ask her to remove him from the list, and she says, okay, of course I'll remove him, but you know, these phone calls are about as effective as trying to plug holes in the Titanic with a postage stamp. You know, there is a service online where you can register your father's name, and they remove dead people from mailing list. Oh, thank God, I said. Please do, she said. So the following Christmas, the mail ceased. I had a clean mailbox. My campaign finally paid off. And so I'm sitting at my dining room table with my own junk mail. And junk mail says a lot about a person. I mean, what did it say about Daddy Pooh? It said he was a retired Army vet, Catholic, conservative Republican who liked Broadway shows. What did it say about me? It says I am a gay liberal writer with credit card issues who likes Broadway shows. And I accept that. And then I kind of had a little epiphany because I thought in my crazed campaign to stop the junk mail, it wasn't just about not wanting that junk mail in my mailbox, but it was about eradicating that side of him. And he always loved me unconditionally. And I thought, better late than never, but I should love him unconditionally. Because, like it or not, that's who he was. And I know there were lots of things about me that he didn't love, or didn't like, rather, but he always loved. So after I go through my junk mail, I move on to the fun stuff. Christmas cards from friends near and far, and I save the largest envelope for last because it promises to be a deluxe Christmas card, and I tear it open, and out pops an 8x10 color glossy photograph of a heterosexual couple in front of a giant Christmas tree. And the man in a red tie sports a monkey mischievous grin, and the woman has the lobotomized glaze of a Stepford wife. And the message reads, Dear J.R.L. Brickhouse, warmest holiday wishes, George and Laura Bush. I forgot to take him off of the list that started the whole thing. And I decided right there, this is true, right that moment, I was like, I'm not going to correct this mistake. And now, we're about 8 years into it, I have my own collection of George and Laura Bush Christmas cards. And every Christmas when they arrive, they're not from the Bushes. They're a simultaneous F you and I love you, Daddy Pooh. Thank you.
Woo! And did everybody see Jamie's heels? Jamie does Instagram stories, TikTok in heels, and they're pretty incredible. You should all check them out. That is our show tonight. Thank you all for coming. Let's hear it again for all of our storytellers. Michaela Bligh, Kim Kirkley, Jamie Brickhouse, and Tim Lopez. And now, if you all would like to ask any questions of the storytellers, I can bring them up here. And do we have any questions from the audience about the stories or the storytellers? Yes, over there.
I'm curious what your thought process was as you decided to reveal your move to sobriety.
Oh, my thought process as I decided to. Well, I didn't want this story to be about getting sober because it was really about getting over down and figuring out who I was and what I wanted to do with my life. So I didn't want that to be the big focus, so I kind of made it take a back seat. But I worked on the story, and I work with mentors who help me with my stories, and Originally, I had it where I started the story with him calling me and asking me to come to California, but that got too confusing going back and forth in time, so then I just did it chronologically, and getting sober was part of that because it happened while he was away. You have questions for the other storytellers, not just me. I can bring them all up here. Guys, why don't you come up? And we can actually take the mic out of the stand now. Does anybody have questions for any of the other storytellers? Yes. Oh, thank you so much. Awesome. Third time you've been to this, that you've been out, you mean since COVID? Oh, wow. Right. Uh-huh.
Yes.
No, Kim has not. Yeah, you know what, Fred, can you bring wait, we're going to bring the microphone over so everybody can hear.
I feel like the
Bring it
stories
closer, yeah.
connect us,
Yeah.
right? You hear yourself, you hear your friends, you hear your loved ones. So thank you again.
Thank you. Another question. We'll bring the microphone over. Raise your hand and, oh, somebody over there.
Hear me. Have you ever been in touch with or know what happened to Dan?
I knew somebody was going to ask that. I was actually good friends with his brother, his younger brother, and he called me out of the blue a couple of months ago, and so yes, I know what happened to Dan. He ended up, like a year after we broke up, he was with the woman, he had a baby, that child now had a baby, and so he's a grandfather just recently, so yeah. So he's living his life in California.
There's one.
Hi, this was wonderful. I've heard you and I think Jamie on Risk before.
Yes.
So
we've both been on
I'm a big fan of both of you and all of you now. Do you have any advice, anyone, for people who want to start getting into storytelling? Like what the first step will be for like writing something out?
Yeah. Here, Michaela, why don't you?
Does anyone have any?
Yeah, I would say take a class, find a workshop, find somebody that that does this kind of thing, like Jamie, or I know a lot of things online. There's a Facebook group actually for New York City storytellers, and people put a lot of their stuff on there. And I feel like this is a kind of a different thing than written stories, I guess. I mean, there's you can kind of borrow a lot, and if your process is to write stuff out, that's also a thing that is, I think, celebrated in this environment. But I feel like there's no better way than just getting into a class and working with people and or going to shows, like that kind of thing.
I agree with that, and I also agree with just going to, now that things are opening up, any storytelling shows that have open mics, and just go and get up there and don't be afraid to to not be perfect and to fail, or to be fantastic on your first. But go to the slams, go to the even if you're not ready to perform, go to the shows and figure out what story you want to tell, and also remember that the best stories are the simple ones. But as long as they have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you're changed, you, the teller, are changed somehow.
Yeah, and I'll just also add that a lot of times, especially if we've listened to a lot of The Moth, we think we have to tell the most tragic story of our lives or the most important story of our lives. And the fact is that so many of our stories have significance to us because they made us who we are right now. And so finding those smaller stories, if it changed you or how you saw the world in some small way, that's worth us hearing. We want to hear it. And we are interesting, even if our lives don't feel objectively fascinating, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the important thing that I learned right away is that everybody has a story. Even if you don't think you have a story, you have a ton of stories. And the kind of storytelling that we did tonight, yes, you can learn it. It's an art, but it's not, it's not rocket science. It really is about just learning how to keep the tension, make people laugh, put your heart into it, being authentic. And if anybody is not on my mailing list, just a little plug for myself, I am going to be doing a workshop probably in June. So just go to TraceySegarra.com and I'll be setting up a workshop then. Other questions?
Are you still practicing Flair bartending? Is that still going on? Did we have any updates on the moves?
It's definitely still going on. Not for me though. But yeah, no, it's actually it's kind of serious in a lot of ways. Like in Vegas and places like Miami, and it's kind of blown up in a lot of ways. It's still done in places like that, where people are more inclined to be in the mood for that kind of thing. I guess like Vegas or Miami. Yeah, I kept bartending for a really long time. I'm kind of semi-retired from that world, but yeah, it's a big part of my life. It always was and always will be, and I'm really proud of that work and love the bar.
Tracey, I have a question for you. Did Dan straighten out his life? Was he still on drugs, practicing medicine? Well, he really got,
I am not at liberty to talk for anybody else, and I don't really know. I don't really know.
Thank you very much.
I thought you were all terrific. I loved all the stories, but my question is for Jamie. How do you walk in those shoes?
Practice, practice, practice. I walked here from the train station, which really helped. No.
Anybody else have questions? Yeah, back in the back there.
So I took a class to do storytelling here during the pandemic. We did it online on Zoom, and Tracey was our teacher, and I just want to say it was wonderful. I've always wanted to tell stories, so it was a great opportunity, and thank you very much. And then Michaela, where did you go to school? Did you go to school in Maine? Because I'm a Mainer.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, I didn't go to school in Maine.
Okay.
I went to school in Connecticut.
Okay.
I just moved to Maine in September, but I love it there.
Good. I'm moving there myself.
Awesome. I think I had lived there for 2 days. I think I lived there for 2 days before I already had Maine registration and Maine license plates. I was like, I'm here. This is where I am.
How your kids are doing?
They're doing well. Today was a little unsettling. My now 3-year-old, who I've had since she was 3 weeks old, she saw her mother for the first time in 2.5 years. So it's a heavy day, kind of. So we're working through it. My feeling around adoption is just tell the kids, let them know they're adopted, don't keep it a big secret. Or in foster care and they have 2 moms. Oh, thank you.
Anybody else? We won't keep you here unless you want us to. All right, I don't see any other hands. Thank you again so much for coming out.